Catus Maximus here with the FlexZilla Ultra Flex Turbo Flex. This grease hose is a mega flexible grease hose. Did I mention that this was extra flexible? And so that's the deal. This is actually just a hydraulic line, a very small piece of hydraulic cord rated for 10,000 psi working pressure. We can see it there. It's actually upside down, so it's actually 1/10,000th of a psi is what it supports. No, it is 10,000 psi, so very high pressure. You could actually technically run hydraulic jacks and all that type of stuff. A lot of people think that heavy equipment, bulldozers and tractors, all the things that have hydraulic pistons on them are operate at 10,000. They don't. Usually it's just a few thousand psi. So these grease gun hoses really are very high pressure hoses. This is supposed to be a Kevlar fiber. It is neon green. As you can see, it's just super bright. And it's supposed to be significantly more flexible than what would be considered standard steel braid. And that's really one of the things that sets it apart. As a standard steel braid, we have an American-made one here, is 3,000 psi. I'm actually using a 24-inch for exactly those flexibility reasons. I found it's a world of difference to have a grease gun and actually to really have two of them, one with a 90-degree adapter and one with a straight adapter. But if you have a really long hose, it's just super easy to manipulate the hose. I have an injection needle on this one because I'm using this often for, putting grease right in between gears and tools and things. But one thing I've never really had a complaint about was the actual flexibility. So one of the things that really attracted me to this cord wasn't so much its extra flexibility, although it does. It's the fact that it just has a higher margin of safety. That really is pretty impressive for them to rate this at 10,000 psi. And I think part of the reason they do that is to alleviate fears that, oh, this cord's a little bit thinner. As we can see, the diameter is just not exactly the same as the black, just a little bit smaller in diameter. And I think that people may be a little bit worried about that, so they made it extra robust or extra high pressure. This is a Taiwanese hose, but the company's based in Marion, Indiana. I do like the fact that we have a spring strain relief right here. This is the side that you would actually put onto the grease gun. That way you can have the most flexibility in the end that you're actually going to work with the tip. So I do appreciate that little bit. It was a little expensive. I think I paid like 12 bucks or something for it, just for an 18-inch version. And it's okay. Not a lot else to talk about. The one thing that I will mention is even though it's super flexible, I don't know about how much more flexible. I think, like I just said, repeating myself, as part of the deal is it's basically rated at triple a standard hose and is a little bit more flexible, especially in the cold weather. I think that, these hoses do get a little bit stiffer in the cold weather, but this should say super flexible, although they don't actually give you any ratings. But what I'm finding is if I put it here and put it on a rail type bend, I can get a little bit more bend with a little bit less resistance. But quite frankly, as far as its flexibility, again, compared to a premium grade steel braided hose, very little difference. To tell you the truth, the steel braided hose is only slightly more rigid than the FlexZilla. And so that's the only thing I would really call them out for, is the fact that even though it's called a FlexZilla, and it is pretty nice with a nice strain relief there, it's not particularly or astoundingly more flexible than just a regular old grease gun line. It is true on really short lengths of the steel cable, the braiding inside gets bound up between the crimps on the two fittings so that it doesn't want to bend as much. But the longer the hose you get, surprisingly enough, the more flexibility you would get in any specific region, just because you have more braid and it's able to give and work a little bit more. And so that was, once again, just what kind of surprised me about the FlexZilla. Even though I do like this little hose, mainly for the reason that it's triple rated 10,000 psi and maintains, and it is more flexible. It maintains at least the same amount of flexibility. That's what I really like about it, is just the idea of having a higher rated hose. I mean, the reality is at 1,000 or a couple thousand psi, many times these quick connect fittings will just pop off at those super high pressures. So it's something that you're not going to have to worry about as far as the rating of the hose. But there are certain situations where you may exceed that, although you would barely even be able to operate a manual grease gun trying to hit those pressures of 3,000, much less 10,000. So anyway, that's my little overly wordy review of the FlexZilla grease gun, or 10,000 psi grease hose. I think it's a neat idea. I like that it is pretty well made and super high pressure. They should have longer lengths. That's probably the biggest deal. It'd be really nice to have like 24-inch version or even 30-inch versions, so you could just have a bit more literally flexibility, not in the hose, but being able to use the tool, because of course really long hoses are just a lot easier to deal with. Really, because the grease gun can be way off to one side, and then you can work and fiddle with the fitting and not have to worry about where the grease gun is. I'd say these 18-inch whips are about the shortest that you want to get. Oh, and last but not least, of course, this 3,000 psi has some pretty heavy-duty brass fittings. These are actually steel fittings here, so that's the crimp, even though it's quite a bit smaller in material than the brass, is steel. It's a much tougher material. It's kind of indicating its pressure ratings. Anyway, really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.